Ariel, good to have you here on the channel. Could you share a little bit about how you got into music marketing? You've been a voice in the space for so long. Yeah, what's the backstory? How'd you get into it?
Okay, so in the early 90s, I graduated with my liberal arts degree in nothing, um, meaning that I was well-rounded and versed, and I did have a theater arts degree, so I could do that. But early on, I developed a deep, deep love for music. And
Mm,
specifically, growing up in New York City, live music was like my church. And I moved back in with my parents, as so many successful college graduates do. And my mother, who is a world-renowned career coach, was like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, no. And she said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to be in the music industry." And she said, "Great, I'm going to call Clive Davis." So she called Clive, who she had gone on double dates with 30 years before. And guess what? Clive didn't answer her call, and he was not willing to help me. Go figure. So, with that used up family resource, I started a painful journey, which ended up gloriously. Um, I became an intern at a massive radio station, followed by a second internship at a incredible PR firm. And this was a world-class publicist who represented Sting, Tina Turner, Peter
mm,
Gabriel, In Excess, and a very small artist no one had heard of at the time, Jeff Buckley.
wow.
So amazing place to learn. From there, I parlayed that. I also worked nights and weekends at a record store. Remember those? We were selling these shiny things. They were called compact discs. People paid 20 to $25 for the privilege of taking one home. So I had that experience. Then I got my dream job, which was working at an independent record label. I did
Mm,
that for a year. My boss was a genius, and I learned on a very small team how genius level savants run record labels. And that was really an amazing education. Fast forward, I parlayed that into working at a massive concert promoter, realized ripping off the Red Hot Chili Peppers for a living was not what I wanted to do, and really got to see the underbelly of what giant concert promotion, especially then, was like, and it was not for me. And at the ripe age of 24, started my own business.
nice.
It was a traditional PR firm at the time, because that's what I had done at all of those agencies and places. And I started primarily as a tour publicist for artists who were in the model of what I had done at the record label, which was heavy, heavy touring, building communities. At that time, they were doing what we now call direct to fan, but it was not called that back then. And that's how I got started.
That's such a varied like experiences across the industry, seemingly in a pretty like you worked in a pretty short time to get there to launch your own thing. Um, I'm interested the indie label that you worked for where you said the guy was like a genius. What were some of the biggest insights and learnings from that stop?
The first thing was we were all working in one room. It started in this genius's, his name is Rob Gordon. He has a name. The record label still exists today. It's called What Are Records.
Mm,
And Rob, we all went to work in Rob's apartment in New York City. It was downtown near where the World Trade Center sadly was. And what I learned and what was amazing about that education was I was sitting in this loft, small loft, and I could hear what everyone was doing. So I heard what Howie, the radio promoter, was doing. I heard what
mm,
Michael, the graphic designer, was doing. I heard what Raj was doing. He was the one in charge of calling all the retail stores and doing the checking in on like how many albums we had in stock at each and every single store. So I got this education. Jim, my direct boss, was in charge of touring and figuring out like sponsorships and how we were going to get artists on the road and matching them to booking agents. And then Rob, I could hear him on the phone, and he was talking to sometimes it was a record label to up level, sometimes it was like a major manager to match our artists with management, or it was the manager of the bands that we were releasing. It was amazing. So I learned so much about how a full record label functions. And I was mostly in the PR and marketing departments, but there could be a night where it was all hands on deck. We were stuffing 1,000 envelopes because we had to do a national mailer. Thank God we don't do those anymore. But it was just a really great way to see how a label works. If you go today and you go work at Sony or Universal, you're sitting in one small area and you probably understand very clearly what that one area does. But to be afforded that opportunity was amazing.
Yeah, it's super cool. So a large part of his genius, it sounds like, was just understanding how all the pieces fit together and being able to.
It was that, and he was a man, still is a man who was keenly aware and horrified. He had worked at EMI, horrified at how major label budgets put pressure on artists. So
Mm,
first thing I learned when you're a touring band is like never ever rent a bus. Never. It costs a fortune. You had to pay all that money to rent the bus, then you had the driver, then you had the gas, then you had the incidentals, and then by the time your tour was over, basically the entire profit went to the bus. So Rob was brilliant and he bought a tour bus for the
mm,
band. And the
yeah.
roadie sound guy was the driver. He just figured out ways to make sure the band was never getting saddled with enormous bills.